Welcome to the Federal Retirement Podcast. My name is David Rates from Benchmark Financial Group, and every month we discuss important topics regarding the retirement planning process for federal employees. This Lunch and Learn series is an interactive discussion where individuals can ask questions. To join these discussions live, you can register by joining our email list at bfgkc.com. Additionally, if you're looking for assistance to get your retirement on the right track, set up an appointment with us today. You can schedule an appointment online by visiting our website, bfgkc.com, or email me directly at david.rates@bfgkc.com. The contact information is also listed in the description. By setting up a complimentary consultation, we can review your financial situation and develop a plan to meet your financial goals. We hope you enjoy this topic and hope to connect with you soon.
Hello, welcome to Benchmark's webinar. My name is Patty Riley. I assist David and Gary Rates. We do welcome questions, so feel free to unmute and ask or type in the chat box. With that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Gary Rates. I'm the founder of Benchmark Financial Group, Kansas City. I think we have a great and informative presentation or message for you today. David Rates, president of Benchmark Financial Group, will be presenting the program entitled Retirement Choices and Decisions. David?
All right, well, thanks again for tuning into this month's call, everyone. We were kind of brainstorming, trying to figure out a good topic to highlight going into the end of the year, and we kind of settled on touching on a few of the bullet points that it seems like we're having a lot of conversations with folks going into the end of the year. There's always a lot of people that are weighing the pros and cons of, do I retire, at the end of December, or do I hang on for a little bit longer? So, like I said, it's for today's call, it's an exercise in just touching on some of the important bullet points to be aware of going into the retirement planning process with Fed benefits. So first slide is just a disclaimer. We're securities licensed, so we have to have a disclaimer on pretty much every piece of marketing material that we send out to the public. So in a nutshell, it's just saying that we're trying to be as accurate as possible with the information we're presenting to you guys and not making any guarantees on anything. So, all righty. So one of the key things that you want to be aware of is obviously you're going to retire on a FERS or SERS pension from Uncle Sam. But if you're married, they give you pretty much two options for a FERS employee. You've got this gross pension. So if you're a FERS employee, you're going to have a gross FERS pension from Uncle Sam. But if you have a spouse, they pretty much give you two options for a surviving spouse benefit. In Uncle Sam's language, the maximum survivor benefit equates to half of your FERS pension, and the partial survivor benefit equates to a quarter of your FERS pension. So the standard default is 50%, which is, it's kind of confusing when you think about it, but a lot of times when you get an estimate from HR, it'll list your survivor benefit as 100%. 100% actually equals half of your FERS pension to a surviving spouse. The partial equals 25% of your FERS pension to a surviving spouse. But before we dig into the details of that specific piece of the pie, it's important to remember that there's an order of eligibility. So former spouse with a court order is important because the language that you want to keep your mind on is with a court order. If you just have a former spouse where it was a clean split, there's nothing to worry about unless there was a quadro that spells out what you're entitled to pay that former spouse from your FERS pension. Now, if that's the case, there's an extra step that takes place because Uncle Sam doesn't deal with quadro language, which is the standard divorce settlement that pretty much every attorney uses. Uncle Sam makes you take an extra step and get what's called a court order available for processing. The COAP defines in dollars and cents what that former spouse is entitled to. Second in line for order of eligibility is a current spouse. And then third and fourth are insurable interest and minor children, which are pretty rare because in order to leave survivor benefit to an insurable interest, Oftentimes you have to take a sizable deduction in your pension in terms of what you're going to be taking home as a retiree. So you almost never see those. Like 99% of the time centers around former spouse with a court order and current spouse. All righty. So like we were saying a second ago, the maximum survivor benefit or the 100% survivor benefit equals 50% of your pension. So in order to leave that benefit, you pay 10% of the back end of your pension to leave it to a surviving spouse. The second option, the partial surviving spouse benefit, like we were saying a second ago, is a quarter of your pension, and you pay 5% of your gross pension benefit in order to leave that 25% to a surviving spouse. But the important bullet point to keep in mind is at the bottom here, which spells out that in order to leave federal employee health benefits to a surviving spouse, if that surviving spouse is the survivor, you got to go with either 50 or 25%. So if you just take the life only option, then you're running a risk because if your spouse, or if you pass away and your spouse is still alive and well, not only does the pension go away, but their access to federal employee health benefits goes away, which is a big deal because Uncle Sam pays about 70% of the total premium for FEHB through your life and your surviving spouse's lives. So that health benefit ties directly to your first pension. So it's an important thing to take into consideration when you're weighing the pros and cons of which survivor option to go with. Now, how do they go about calculating your first pension? So there's an important distinction between what they call the unreduced first pension and the full unreduced first pension. So if you're retiring with what they call unreduced first pension, normally the three main milestones of age and years of service are minimum retirement age with 30 years, age 60 with 20, or age 62 with at least 5 years of service. If you fall into one of those three categories, your pension calculation for FERS pension benefit is 1% times high 3 times years of service. If you wanted to take advantage of what they call the full unreduced FERS pension, that would be a situation where you'd have to retire at age 62 with at least 20 years of service, and then your pension calculation goes up by 10%. So that's 1.1 times high 3 times years of service. So sometimes when we're working with folks, we're talking about the difference between, well, if you're retired at 60 versus 62, the pension benefit is going to be 10% higher, which is a noticeable increase. But sometimes it just depends on how close to burnout status people are. So but you want to know the cards that you're working with going into making a decision on the timing of retirement. So it's important to know those milestones of age and years of service and how they impact your pension calculation. But moving forward, Social Security and the FERS retirement supplement. All righty, so it's important to keep in mind that Social Security is a monthly payment that continues while you're alive and well after the point of turning it on. So it's not like an IRA account or TSP account where it has a lump sum balance tied to it, and you can't just call up Social Security and get an emergency opportunity withdrawal for a couple $1,000. Social Security is a monthly benefit that's payable throughout your lifetime. Now, it's not fixed. It goes up with cost of living increases. The last couple of years, they've been fairly robust. It was about 7-8% the last 2 years, but it's been a little lighter than that going forward. I think they announced it's going to be about 3% this year, but it tracks the consumer price index. And when people get to the point of being 65, assuming they've turned on Social Security, if you opt to take Medicare Part B, those premiums are deducted out of the back end of your Social Security payment. So, but we always remind folks that the thing about Social Security is Uncle Sam has already squirreled away this pot of money that they plan to pay you as a Social Security recipient. So that being said, the reason that the benefit payment is higher at age 70 versus age 62 is because you're getting a shorter duration of payments out of the pool of cash Uncle Sam has set aside to pay you. So that's one really important variable to keep in mind. because if you turned it on at 70 as opposed to 62, you just gave up 8 years of monthly payments. And if the alternative is to wait longer until you get to full retirement age or age 70, or retire and live on less monthly income, or retire and start burning through more like TSP, IRA type of money to get to either your full retirement age or Social Security, what's the better option? I would say really how you win with Social Security is you turn the benefit on sooner rather than later and squeeze as much money out of the plan as possible and live a long and happy and healthy retirement. Now, there are caveats there. I mean, sometimes people will retire from the government and be looking at a consulting job that pays them about as much as they were making while they were working for Uncle Sam. So that would be a variable or a scenario where it would make sense for you to potentially defer turning on Social Security. But generally, we tend to gravitate towards turning it on sooner as opposed to later. And if you're not spending every dollar of it on monthly expenses, you can always reinvest whatever's left over on an after-tax basis. So that's something to keep in mind. I always think it's important to just throw you the graphic about the Social Security statement, because the big bold number on the front of the statement is what's payable at your full retirement age. So in this scenario, full retirement age was, for this hypothetical example, 67, but you're first eligible to turn Social Security on at age 62. So it can be a little confusing if you're not used to looking at those Social Security statements. But when you flip through past the first page, which, like I said, has the big bold number for full retirement age at the front, it'll give you the 62 number, the full retirement age number, which is usually 65 to 67, depending on when you were born, and the age 70 number. So obviously the age 70 number is the highest payment amount, but that also meant that you gave up hypothetically 8 years of monthly payments to get to 70. So moving on to the FERS supplement, there's oftentimes a lot of questions tied to the FERS supplement, but in a nutshell, the FERS retirement supplement is this reward from Uncle Sam. If you have enough years of service to retire from the government, but you're not eligible for Social Security yet, they'll pay you this bridge payment that mirrors Social Security. So most of the time when people are getting that supplemental payment, it's a scenario where they retired at MRA with 30 years of service, or usually age 62 or age 60, age 58, something like that, where oftentimes age 60 with 20 or right around there is that time frame where people fall into to get the supplement. And the calculation formula for it is just based off your years of FERS service. So Social Security takes into account your entire working history, but the supplemental payment is calculated on your years of FERS service. Years of FERS service divided by 40 times your age 62 Social Security amount gives you a pretty close idea of what that first supplemental payment is going to pay you. So, but one other caveat about both Social Security and that supplemental payment is if you're getting it, Uncle Sam doesn't let you go make an unlimited amount of money, but it's important to define what they're looking at for the earnings test. So non-work income doesn't count against the earnings test for the supplement or Social Security. So that'd be government benefits like your first pension, state pension, investment earnings, interest, any outside pension income, annuity income, capital gains income, that doesn't count against the earnings test. What Uncle Sam is primarily concerned about is if you're getting a first pension and that supplemental payment, then you go get like a W-2 salary type of job, there's a cap on what you can make. But for self-employed people, or if you're getting like 1099 income as an independent contractor, the money counts when you receive it, not necessarily when you earn it. So, and that earnings test amount going forward into this upcoming year is $22,320 is what you can make without having to worry about them clawing back the money that they paid you in that supplemental benefit. But there are ways around it. This time last year, we had a client that was retiring at age 58, and he had a ranch and was looking to bring in a pretty healthy amount of income selling cattle. So what he did is he wrapped his ranch up into an LLC that his wife was the owner of, and that put him in a spot where he was continuing to get the first supplement, but he didn't have to worry about going over the earnings test amount because the money was getting paid to a corporation that his wife was the owner of. So if you got questions about the supplement, which there can be a lot of them, don't hesitate to reach out. This is just a graphic because a lot of times it's easy to overlook the fact that most people are in a spot where their supplemental payment is usually anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month less than what Social Security is going to pay you, hypothetically at 62 if you turn it on at 62. So sometimes people will build that into their income plan for retirement, knowing that, if you distribute, if you're strategic about what you're doing and you distribute for a finite window of time, a little bit more money on the front end, knowing that you can dial that withdrawal amount back when you get switched from age 61 to 62, because you're going to see an auto increase of $500 or $750 a month or $1,000 a month by switching from the supplement to 62. It can tie into your income plan going forward as a retiree. So it's always important to remember that first supplemental piece is based off just your years of federal service, whereas Social Security takes into account your entire work history. So Social Security benefit payment amount is 62 is always a little bit higher than what the supplement's going to pay you. All righty. So federal employee group life insurance. If you haven't looked at FEGLI in a while, it's important to just double check because it's easy to set it and forget it. Oftentimes people will sign up for it at new employee orientation and then forget about it until they hit certain milestones of age. And then if you don't know the cards that you're working with, you'll see an auto increase in the price. So there's four main components, but the first main component is basic coverage, which is your salary rounded to the next $1,000 plus an additional $2,000. Option A is kind of like a burial policy almost. It's just a flat $10,000. Option B is really where people see the snowballing in terms of the premiums once they get further and further down the road of their careers. So option B is that piece where you can get up to 5 times your salary of additional coverage, but it becomes cost prohibitive the older you get. So like from age 55 to 60 is really where you see the first big pay increase. And then from 60 to 65, 65 to 70, the price for option B doubles every 5-year chunk. So the running joke is people look at their pay stub if they turn 60 and they're scratching their heads as to why it's a couple $100 less than what they were used to getting. It's just because they had a birthday and it was an auto increase in the premiums on those option B units. And Uncle Sam's not going to give you a heads up about that. And they're not going to send you a birthday card either. So again, it's important to stay on top of the cards that you're working with if you got the full boat in FEGLI. And then option C is the family coverage. So it's up to $12,500 on each child and up to $25,000 on each spouse. Option C isn't crazy expensive while you're working. It just becomes cost prohibitive if you wanted to hang on to it as a retiree. So again, we spend a lot of time with folks helping them get familiar on what they have with FEGLI and potentially making adjustments based off of their individual situation. So moving forward, thrift savings plan. All right. So TSP. So the main funds, now granted they've opened it up to a mutual fund window, but I don't know if I'd go down that road. So I'd probably just focus on the main fund, GFCS&I. So G is traditionally the safest fund. It's got short-term government security, so it doesn't go down in value when the market's volatile, but it's not going to blow the socks off of growth to the plus side when the market's trending in bull market territory. F is not a bad fund. It's just in today's world, you want to keep a close eye on F. It's fixed income. It's directly tied to where we're at with interest rates. So if you're wondering why you might have seen some losses in your allocation in F fund last year, each time the Fed raised interest rates a quarter of a percentage point, that caused the market price of your shares in F to go down in value each time. So when you're in an increasing interest rate environment, folks on Wall Street, they won't pay as much today for fixed income shares when interest rates are going up because they're anticipating getting a higher yield on new bonds getting issued in the future. So that's why you see the decrease in share price of F fund each time the Fed incrementally bumps interest rates. C fund is what they call a common stock index. So that's the S&P 500 index in a nutshell. And then I is international. S is small cap companies. So companies that aren't big enough to be in the S&P 500, but are still in the growth phase. And then they've added a number of different life cycle options. So life cycle options now range from all the way from L income, which is the most conservative, to L2065, which would be the most aggressive of the life cycle funds. But it's important to note that the life cycle funds are just made up of a pie chart of G, F, C, S, and I. So, but we'll get to that here in a second. All righty. I always try to put a snapshot of TSP fund returns year to date in here. So this would be a snapshot of TSP fund returns as of October 2023. So everything is in plus territory aside from F fund, but that's directly tied to what we were talking about a second ago, where F fund, the return on F fund depends largely on what the Fed is doing with interest rates. G funds up in positive territory year to date, 3.5%, just shy of 3.5%. That would be, if you're thinking about safe options to go with, G fund would probably be a better one to use right now as opposed to F fund. But again, it's not that F fund is bad. It's just the market is a fluid thing, and you from time to time, based off of what's going on, sometimes it's better to be invested in certain funds as opposed to others. So C funds up a little over 10% year to date. S is 2% to the plus side, and I funds just shy of 3.5% to the plus side. But I always think it's important to take note of the fact that C fund since inception, which was January 1988, its average annual return has been just shy of 10.5%. It doesn't do 10.5% every year, but over the long haul, it's been a pretty solid performing fund. It's just, you don't want to make an emotional decision with C fund. Like a lot of folks in 2008, they got obviously rattled by what was going on in the markets, took all their money out of CS and I, parked it in G, and then they were paralyzed trying to figure out when to buy back in. So you come to peace with the fact that market volatility is a fact of life. And as long as you don't make an emotional decision at the wrong time and move it out of stock funds into G, if you do that, there's no way for you to recoup the losses going forward. So that's always something to keep in the back of your mind when it comes to TSP fund options. So this is a snapshot of L2030 as of October 2023. So remember, I was talking about a second ago, the L funds are not a bad option at all. It's just they're a pie chart of G, F, C, S, and I. So going back to that conversation about F, if you're in L2030 and F fund is down 2.6% year to date, and hypothetically you could have used G fund as your safe allocation, we talked to folks about potentially doing it manually, where you, on a quarter by quarter basis, you take a look at whatever life cycle fund you want to have your investments mirrored to, and sometimes it would make sense to do it manually in a nutshell, or just move the portion that they have in F, which is like 6% as of October this year, into G. Then you got at least you're in a spot where you're not getting hit with a negative return on what would hypothetically be invested in F. So there's a lot of time that gets spent on talking about TSP fund options and investment strategies. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, so TSP, it's a fairly new feature, but over the last few years, they've added a Roth component. So you have the option to invest in a Roth TSP, which is a powerful tool, but it's important to take into consideration the key bullet points of a Roth. So you're always weighing current tax bracket versus future tax bracket. So like if you're on the tail end of your working career, you're presumably making the most amount of income that you've made. So if you're in that spot, funding a Roth, you kind of start to lose the tax leverage because the thing about a Roth is you're paying taxes today on the money that you're putting into the Roth to have the gain come out tax-free after age 59 and a half or 5 years longer of the two. So ideally, if you really want to leverage a Roth, you fund it early on, and then you have this large chunk of gain that you take out after tax-free after 59 and a half. So again, contributions into the Roth side of things are made with after-tax money, but the caveat to that is you don't have to pay tax on the earnings as long as you wait 5 years or after age 59 and a half to take the money out. But the last bullet point is important for Roth because you have a lot higher contribution limit with Roth TSP than you do with an outside Roth IRA. So that's an important one to keep in mind. All righty, so distribution options when it comes to the point of being a retiree. It can be a little confusing, but in a nutshell, they give you the option to do a lump sum payment. When we say lump sum payment, that would be like taking the money, putting it in your checking account type of a situation. Over the years, we've had a number of conversations with people who are like, well, why don't I just take it out, pay off the mortgage, and then I won't have that payment anymore. But they forget that if you take a couple $100,000 out for a lump sum payment and put it in your checking account, you're paying potentially federal, state, and maybe depending on how you do it, you could hypothetically have an additional 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if it's an important thing to know, again, going to that conversation of knowing the cards that you're working with going into retirement. So lump sum payment, usually there are better avenues than taking it in one fell swoop and putting in your checking account. Your second option would be to transfer the pre-tax portion to a traditional IRA or the Roth portion of your TSP to a Roth IRA. You got a lot of flexibility and investment options to choose from in the outside world. So that's an important variable to take into consideration. Sometimes if people are in an early retirement situation, they'll leave money in TSP and use a specific amount for fixed monthly payments for a finite window of time. So that's an option. And the last bullet point would be fixed annuity, but you probably don't want to go with the fixed annuity options that they prepackage inside of TSP. We always call those the Model T of the annuity options. So it's pretty old school in terms of the annuity options that they prepackage for you inside of Thrift. All righty, how to get started. So our process usually centers around at least 3 meetings. So our first meeting is what we call a fact-finding meeting, where we identify and gather the documents that are pertinent to putting together a version 1 retirement plan for you. So we usually send people a list of identifying information to gather, and the more accurate that identifying information is, the more accurate we can be with running the numbers and putting together projections on your federal benefits and an income strategy together for you too. Second meeting is where we take all that info that we talked about in the fact-finding meeting and we put together a written report for you that just breaks down all of your choices for each piece of the pie in terms of the federal stuff, what your options are with FEGLI, what your options are with pension. But one of the most important things that we do in that second meeting is we detail your income strategy. So we run a comparison of, what's your net monthly income that you're bringing in while you're actively employed relative to the net monthly income that you're looking at as a retiree. Because it's easy to forget that you have a lot of deductions that you pay for as an active employee that go away at the point of retirement. So that's an important one. And then oftentimes people are trying to figure out, I've spent all this time saving money in TSP. What's the most efficient and effective way to distribute it? And how do I do it so I don't have to worry about running out of or outliving my money or running out of money at the wrong time by not setting your distribution strategy up the right way. And then subsequent meetings, that usually involves implementing an income plan, putting all the dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's on retirement paperwork. What choices you want to go with your retirement options with the Fed stuff. In addition to that third meeting, so oftentimes involves setting up insurance contracts or investment accounts, depending on your specific situation. And then it's a process of managing those assets and that strategy going forward. So even after the point of retirement, the people that are clients of ours, we stay in contact with them, and life happens. So sometimes they need to make adjustments to the income strategy that we set up initially at the point of retirement. So it's an ongoing basis for folks that we're working with. How about any questions?
We don't have any questions at this point. In the meantime, if you want to start talking about your specific situation in future retirement, feel free to call or email. David, do you have anything else?
Seriously, if you have any questions or you think of anything after the call that you like some clarification on or just a second opinion on, don't hesitate to give me a call, shoot me an email, or you can always go to our website and just submit a request, and we'll get in touch with you as soon as we can. So thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you guys in the near future.